Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the Voices of Young People.
Hello, welcome back to Season 5. We're continuing our series coinciding with our brand new report, The State of Religion and Young People 2021, Navigating Uncertainty. I'm Marta Abawaji. I'm the head of community engagement at Springtide, and I get to produce this podcast, which is so fun, getting to sit down and talk with all different young people representing many different faith backgrounds and spiritual identities. And this episode has Daniel. He was a college senior when we recorded this episode, and he's also a football quarterback at Duke University. And he describes how Judaism has provided him with a deep sense of community throughout all different stages of his life. He highlights how participating in these weekly Shabbat dinners on his campus gives a weekly rhythm where he can take a break, stop, breathe, reflect, connect with other Jewish students and faith leaders. And he also describes how being in conversation with friends as well as his teammates from different faith traditions allows him to ask questions about his own faith practices. So here's the episode.
I'm Daniel. I'm 22 years old. I'm currently in North Carolina, where I've spent the last 4 years after graduating from Duke University with a major in economics. During my time, I was also a quarterback on the football team, which took up a lot of my time. And I'm also Jewish, which has been a huge part of my life. And my Judaism's always been a huge part of my life ever since I was little. My parents used to take me to synagogue every Saturday when I was young. And I was always just very connected to it. I used to, when I was even like 2-3 years old, I used to, at my Montessori religious school, act out parts of the service by myself and stuff. And my Montessori teachers didn't quite know what I was doing, but they knew I was enjoying myself. And I always enjoyed going to synagogue every Saturday when I was younger. I'm also the grandson of Holocaust survivors. So that's been a huge also part of my identity and, my religion, who I am. And I've always just felt a strong connection to Judaism. That's of course evolved as I've gotten older and learned more and, entered different phases of my life, but it's always been a central part of who I am. I think what keeps me connected with, my faith community as a whole is kind of the emphasis on community that I found in Judaism and how so many things are done as a community. I've also been fortunate from, growing up, going to Temple Emmanuel in Providence. That was a great community. And now here at Duke, there's a great Jewish community here. I spent a lot of time at both the Freeman Center, which is the Hillel that's actually part of campus, and also the Chabad on campus. We have two great rabbis, both Rabbi Nassim at Chabad and then Rabbi Alana at the Freeman Center. And both are great communities where I've really found a home in. And just the people and, just the community aspects of Judaism, it's really kind of my experience, communal religion, right? You're supposed to pray with other people. You're supposed to celebrate and, eat with other people. And so much of Judaism revolves around being in a community. And that's been, one of the things that's helped me be connected to a lot of my, I've made a lot of great friends from the Jewish community here at Duke. And also back home, I went to Jewish day school, K through 5. So I'm still keep in touch with many of my friends from my class there, and just my Jewish community at home as well. being around others and community and doing things, whether it be, praying together or, eating together, like a Passover Seder, Shabbat dinner I try to go to every week because that's kind of, we're often like, and that's been a huge experience here at Duke is trying to, go to Shabbat dinner pretty much every Friday night. And it's, my roommates always know I'm going to Shabbat dinner. And that kind of, it's like, okay, it's Friday night, Shabbat dinner. Just being around others as well, I think. I think that extends to not just typical religious activities, but also, volunteering as a group. I've, done some stuff, with my teammates. Duke football is pretty involved in Habitat for Humanity. So doing that too, I think it's a different kind of maybe spiritual thing, but I think also just, tikkun olam, making the world a better place, but doing things in my community. And then also just having discussions about, religion and other things with people from different backgrounds and hearing their perspectives. I think, that community aspect too of doing things with other people that are kind of religious, spiritual in some sense. I think they're kind of two different times where I feel deeply connected. I think one is definitely, when I'm in the Jewish community, especially I think around kind of the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, just because that's, such a time of atonement and, the start of the new year and stuff. I think, and just being around, there's so many holidays in that month too. Just on that, Freeman or Chabad even more than normal, and doing more Jewish things than normal. That helps me feel just within the community. But I also think, playing football at Duke, football is a very Southern sport. It's also a pretty religious sport. And being kind of, we had another couple Jews on the team, but being, such, not very uncommon to be a Jewish football player, especially down south. And, being one of the only Jews on the team and, a team that, we pray every day as a team. We've had every year we, take a team trip to church and stuff. And kind of doing that also makes, and kind of standing out as one of the only Jews, makes me also feel more connected to Judaism as well. And, realize that, I am kind of different than my teammates in that sense, but I am Jewish. And I think that also kind of, I noticed it made me kind of yearn for the Jewish, Jewish connections more and stuff, and to be, want to go, to Freeman or, Chabad or, do something Jewish after those things as well, I'd say. I'm not sure I have a specific time where it's kind of been an empty or shallow well, but I would say, I'm constantly, questioning things. I think, one of the things about Judaism is kind of, Israel means Yisrael, kind of fight with God, kind of that kind of, constantly questioning things and having discussions and, studying and, learning different things and wrestling with that and what it means and, what do I believe and things. And I think that's kind of, I, struggle with that all the time. I'm not sure I have a specific example of when, that well of faith was kind of empty or shallow, but, I've definitely questioned things many times, whether that be kind of from a discussion with one of my Christian friends who brings up a point or, something and just struggling to figure out what my beliefs are and, how religion plays a role in my life, I guess.
Just a quick break to give a shout out. Springtide is able to offer this podcast because of donors who make our research and actionable insights possible. Katie, a youth worker, recently wrote us saying, "One of my favorite discoveries of the previous year has been Springtide Research Institute. I love sharing their work with fellow youth leaders and mentors. Their latest book, Work Life, is quite insightful." You can see more of our current findings on our website, springtideresearch.org, where you can also make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that helps me feel most rooted is going to Shabbat dinner pretty much every week. And I think, that's just kind of okay. It's Friday night, it's time to decompress for the week. Especially being a student athlete in a school like Duke, not a lot of free time throughout the week, always kind of waking up early and then school and then, other commitments and stuff. I was always kind of running around. So, Friday night Shabbat dinner was always a great place to kind of take a minute and breathe. And, even if that's, the only Jewish thing I do that week, that was just something that was always there and helped me, get back to, okay, just take a deep breath. And, just have that, couple hours. So that was, I think, a huge part. And that was always we would always try and have kind of a Shabbat dinner as a family growing up, turn off the phones. As my sister and I got older, that wasn't always the reality because we're both now college athletes and we were both always had games and stuff. But, we would always try and have a Shabbat dinner whenever possible as family. And also it was a great way to, see friends. We would try and, have friends go over to friends' houses for Shabbat dinner. And, that was always a huge part and still is. Both Chabad and Freeman have Shabbat dinners every Friday night. I mean, numbers at both have gone significantly up since I first got here. My freshman year, which has been great to see the community more engaged. I think a large part of that is just how great both the rabbis are and how engaging they are. They're obviously very different and, how they practice Judaism is very different. But I think they both bring a lot of, joy and knowledge and, they're both great at getting kids engaged and wanting to come. And, Chabad was also growing too. It was like, there'd be one or two tables my freshman year. And, pre-COVID, they actually would have sometimes close to 100 kids there. And so that was like in their house. And they just moved to a bigger place because they couldn't, fit everyone really. And then the Freeman Center's a beautiful, huge space, also great for studying as well and hosting various other activities. So those, both host Shabbat dinners every week. Both Shabbat dinners free to all students, which has been great. And so I've gone to plenty of Shabbat dinners at both places. And I've enjoyed going to both places. I found a home in it at both. Some students have only, prefer strongly one over the other, but that has not necessarily been the case with me. And I've learned a lot from, both rabbis. I keep kosher as well. So that's been kind of a huge thing, I guess, to almost center myself to. I've had numerous discussions with teammates and stuff about it. Like, why are you only eating that when there's a whole, why are you only eating, the salad or something at team meals, having, hundreds of team meals together every day and stuff. So that was, I think, the first main thing that, why I started getting questions about my Judaism. And also having kind of a mezuzah on my door. My freshman year, my roommate, he's from, Dallas, Texas, didn't know many Jews. So I explained to him kind of what a mezuzah was. He was also, faith was a very big part of his life. So we were able to kind of have some discussions around that. But, keeping kosher has always kind of reminded me of my Judaism as well, because it's been something that's always present, whether, I'm going out to eat with friends or, different things around that. That's probably the most noticeable aspect of my Judaism on a daily basis, just because I eat a lot. I've learned a lot from, my teammates of other faiths and my friends of other faiths. But I think just being on the football team, praying before every lift or, the team does the Lord's Prayer before every game or after practice. That's just, I think, more just reminded me to kind of be thankful and, take more moments to stop and kind of pray and be thankful and stuff. So I would say that would be the biggest takeaway, is just kind of, in their connection to, religion and spirituality, has encouraged me to do it more in myself as well, I would say. Rather, maybe nothing specific, but I would say in that sense, just take more moments throughout the day. Yeah. So as I said, when I was really little, 2, 3, 4, I would, go to services and, act out parts of the service at home. And I always enjoyed going to synagogue. The bagel lunches after services were always great. And then a bunch of my close friends would go every week. We would kind of mess around during services. And then as I got older, I went to Jewish day school. I was always really enjoyed, the Hebrew and the religious aspect of it. I was always very connected. As I learned more, I went to public middle and high school, but continued to study, went to religious school. And then after that, continued to kind of do the Hebrew high school, where I was able to study with some various rabbis and teachers, and that was great. And then getting to college, I think it's still a huge part of my life. I think one of the defining things about college is being around far, back home. Not all my friends were Jewish, but a good amount were, and everyone knew about Judaism, what it was, right? We had Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur off at public school. And just, so many kids being Jewish, kids knew about Judaism and stuff. And coming to Duke, and being around kids who were from, rural areas of the South, or just had never been around Jews, didn't, know anything about Judaism. So, having to explain, and also why I do different things that I do, or why I don't do this, but do this, has made me really think about that as well. Why do I do this? Why do I believe this? And I think that's also kind of solidified my faith. And, I'm constantly, as I said, questioning, everything and why we do things, but also it solidifies when you question it and, receive an answer that you like, or that you're satisfied with, or, even that you're not satisfied with, but you're continuing to question. It makes you, I think, believe all the more so in what you are doing. So having that kind of question by friends, not in a, bad sense at all, but just out of genuine curiosity, what's that mezuzah? What's, why aren't you coming to practice today? All those questions, and, explaining the answers to that, which I don't mind doing at all. It just helps me also, has, helped me ask questions myself, and, hopefully a lot of the times receive answers, but, not always the case.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and to download our latest report, The State of Religion and Young People 2021, Navigating Uncertainty. Thanks to a very generous donation, the digital version of this report is free to download. Springtide Research Institute is supported by donors who believe in the critical research and insight-generating work we do on behalf of young people. Make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options on our website today. Today's show was produced by Marta Abuaji and TJ Birnbaum, with original music by high school student Christian Unthank. Special thanks to the 10 guests featured on Season 5 and to all the young people whose voices and perspectives make our research possible. Follow us on social media at We Are Springtide and interact with a variety of resources connected to the 2021 report with the hashtag Religion and Young People 2021. Thanks for listening.